right, so listen, let's talk about something that I think that can be somewhat controversial, but also very, very misunderstood. And we're going to kind of treat this like a little workshop, okay? So I want to talk to you about affirmations. Do they manifest? Do they work? What did Neville really mean when it seems like, and that's a very key word, you can interpret, if you read wrong, his works, that he was against affirmations, okay? And but first and foremost, before we get into any of that, what I want to do is, and welcome, is what I want to do is I want to talk to you about something that is, and remember, I always start with something that's a little bit weird or off, that seems off topic, right? Hello, 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 hey, yo, yo, yo. Thank you for the like. Thank you for, how you doing, Redhead? How you doing, how you doing, how you doing? So I want to talk to you about, we're going to talk about affirmations, whether they work, do they not work, what does neuroscience say, but also what does Neville mean when he talks about this? Why do people get that whole idea of affirmations wrong? And if they do work, how can we create ones that work? So, but you know me, I don't like to start normal. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about first, we're going to explain what seems to be a dichotomy. Okay, so meaning like things that look like they're opposites, but they're not. And that is the inner man and the outer man. Okay, so to understand affirmations and how they work and why they work and if they work or if they are, if there's something that we should not be wasting our time on. Okay, so the inner man and the outer man. Let's start there. So the inner man is known as God or love or peace or, you know, perfection, whatever it is that you define. There's usually loads and handfuls of synonyms that people use without even knowing it. You don't have to believe in a God to know that there is an element to yourself, right, that we can't really always explain very well. So even if you don't believe in anything like a God inside of you or outside of you, you can use the word soul or spirit or something along those lines, right? And when you talk about that, okay, you've already then made the assumption that if you have a soul, there's something that's not the soul. Okay, hey Kevin, how you doing, man? How you doing, mi amigo? How's everybody doing? Let me know what you're doing on this. What is this, Wednesday? I don't know, man. I just make up days as I go along. Yeah, Wednesday. Happy Hump Day. And remember, I say those, but I absolutely love every day of the week. So, and as you should, because we're manifesting every day. Why not love every day? But so we're going to talk about affirmations. Do they work? Do they not work? Why many people say that they fail? Why people misinterpret Neville as saying that you should never ever use affirmations? What neuroscience says, because there actually is research into affirmations, according to neuroscience research. But again, and the reason why I'm repeating myself is because I know that there's new people coming on. So, hello. So again, there's an inner self and there's an outer self. Okay, there is a so some people use the word 3D. I absolutely hate that word. I know why they use it. It's yet again a misinterpretation of quantum physics. And at the same time, though, I just call this a stage world, right? Because I'm an actor, so of course calling this the stage world makes sense to me, right? Now you can call it whatever you want, okay? And you know. And what's really interesting, and I'm actually going to talk about that, Kevin. So about the idea of contradictions and whether they exist as contradictions or is it just an interpretation. You're probably already figuring it out. For me, anything that looks like a contradiction is us forgetting that we're God. And so yes, paradoxes and contradictions exist only because you are still identifying as a human who thinks that you're a human identifying as God rather than the other way around, right? So on top of that, though, and I'll make sense of what I just said as well, because I'm sure that sounds a little bit confusing. But you have the inner self and the outer self. So the soul, God, love, peace, whatever it is, right? So you have that's the inner self. It's the all-powerful thing, okay? And if you have this part of yourself that you name as God or whatever, and it's kind of powerful, you're not going to manifest. Well, what I will say that you'll manifest, because you're always manifesting, but you're not going to really manifest through the power of realizing what this being is that is inside of you. Okay? And so, yes, there is a differentiation between these two beings. And by the way, if you're just coming in, we're talking about affirmations, but you know me, I like to go through a back door. So, you ultimately want to realize that there is this being, this essence, this soul, this power, this spirit, this love thing inside of you. That is experiencing you, right? That thing, that being is experiencing you, your name, your avatar, your emotions, everything that you keep repeating over and over, right? Because remember, neuroscience shows that your identity is a bundle of memories that you keep repeating and you get dopamine for, right? That's why Neville's notion of revision, I'm not going to talk about much about it today, is very powerful. Because he's saying any emotionally fueled memory can be changed, right? And now neuroscience is slowly catching up to that with ideas like neuroplasticity. So, then there's the outer self, okay? So this is the outer self. The biblical kind of word for that is the flesh, right? And the mystics use that as a metaphor, okay? The mystical writers of Scripture. And so they even use the word carnal, and they tied sin to this outer person, okay? And so sin, by the way, is nothing wrong with you. There's nothing fucked up about you. I completely disagree with that. And I can even go into the psychology and even some of the agrarian mythology of where the idea of sin came from. Because sin in and of itself was an Egyptian, well, how about this? Not just Egyptian, because it more like Middle Eastern god, and that's why the agrarian, as in farm life, actually came into play, right? Because it was the god of the moon. And then you have Ra, which is the god of the sun, okay? And then you have, sin separates you from God. Yeah, they're just saying that the moon separates you from the sun. Duh. They're talking about night and day. Okay, so that's the agrarian side, as in like the farm mythology, right? That was very much explaining what was happening in the world. And then it shifted as it went from the Old Testament to the New Testament, and it became this ontological claim about how wrong we are, which is, again, BS. That's actually a misunderstanding of the word. The reason why this is important is because, again, and don't worry, this all makes sense with affirmations, but the reason why this is important is because when you understand this, okay, that sin has nothing to do with how bad humanity is, or we have some sort of evil side to us or a shadow side. I don't believe in that. And yes, I'm a psychologist saying I don't believe that humans have a dark side. Okay, I don't believe there's nothing. In fact, I believe all humans are nothing, where nothing's trying to be something. So Paul says it this way: we're all jars of clay. What does a jar of clay do? Well, think about a cup. What does a cup do? It's filled up, but it's filled up with what? Stuff that you accept. But prior to that, what is a cup? What is a cup, right? A cup is something that has nothing in it, right? It's just a vessel, okay? And so, to me, that's a better understanding than saying there's something wrong with humanity. I don't believe any human is fucked up. I believe we accept certain things that are true and we play them out. That's manifestation anyways, right? And so, part of this is, realizing that when Neville talks about this and when the Bible talks about the man, the sinful man, what he's saying is you're always going to have desire. That's a better way of understanding the word sin. That means you're going to always have or be in a state of unfulfilled desire. Okay? So that means you're always going to want something. That's a more positive way to say that. You're always going to have a desire. Neville actually talks about this. I'm talking about a little bit deeper than he went. But you're always going to want something. You're always going to start with a desire, right? Now, that desire can start out of what you already don't have, or it can be just a new complete desire that you just have, say, that looks cool, I would like that. Here's the thing. Even when you say that looks cool, you're saying you don't have it, right? Because you're measuring by what that object is and how you value it. So your value system is predicated on, I don't have this, right? And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Because Neville says, everybody starts with a desire. You need to start with a clear desire. right? And we talked about that before. Clear desire means you don't have BS muddling it up. You don't have social pressures. You don't have religious pressures. You don't have gender pressures. Nothing. Okay? So, right? Yeah. And Kevin, that's very true. And I mean, like, I would say that anything, people are hoping that it will make them happy. And the game, right? Yes, Yanju. And what you do though is when you're, so I would say that, yeah, so what Kevin's saying about feeling, like a lot of actors do that. Like I know I'm going in with a sense of completion. So I actually enjoy it. Whereas like some people actually go in because they want to feel a sense of completion. Right? And that's what manifestation is. You're going in, you're feeling a sense of completion about paid bills. You're going in feeling a sense of completion about feeling loved and accepted. And then lo and behold, somebody comes in your life and they love and appreciate you, right? Because they mirrored you. That's really what it is. So, you know, when we come to understand this though, that when the esoteric authors, the mystic authors are writing about the sinful man, it is not the fucked up man. And sorry, I'm talking aggressively because I have no patience for the kind of like conservative Christian understanding of this idea, right? Because it ostracizes and pushes people out, right? And that is not definitely operating on the golden rule, which Neville says we all should be, right? And so when you are understanding this, what that means is you'll always have desires. You're always going to have desires. That's just part of this process. Neville says that the world is a school, right? Meaning it's God waking up to itself being God in human form, right? And so everything that you're learning is never a loss. Neville says never concede, never accept, never celebrate, never concede to loss. Don't ever think, oh, I lost my keys. Bullshit. You never did, right? You've always had them. You just forgot that you were God who had them, right? And so, you know, it's a one, or if you want somebody in your life and you feel lonely and they left you, no, they didn't. And I know, listen, I know that your mind is going to go to, yeah, but they're physically not here. In here, they're always going to be physically with you. Now, this is why Neville really challenges us to use the inner five senses and not so much rely on the outer five senses, which is logic. That's really what he's saying, right? Don't take logic and make it God. You do that, you will basically get whatever it is that you assume in this world to be true. And so if you think, for example, that it takes time to get money, it's going to take time to get money. If you think it takes effort to get money, it's going to take effort to get money. And you're using your senses because you're like, well, yeah, but look at my friend Joe. Look at Elon Musk. Look at this, blah, blah, blah. No, F it all, right? You give it up. You give that logic up and say, I can be anything. I can do anything. I don't need to rely on anything outside of me, right? And that's what Neville is talking about second causes, which we talked about yesterday. I mean, the day before yesterday, sorry, right? There's no such thing as a second cause. You're only giving your power away. That's what's happening, right? So don't give your power away. So, and so, you know, when you realize that you're going to have desires, then you have tools to get those desires. And affirmations are one of those desires. So a lot of people actually come to me, even clients and stuff, and are saying, hey, do affirmations work? Do robotic affirmations work? So I'm going to share with you a little piece of neuroscience. Pretty gnarly, okay? And this is going to help me answer for you whether or not robotic affirmations work or not, okay? So, and you may have also heard of the, and I'm not going to go over it today. You guys can share about it in the chat here, though, is how it's called bioharmonizing. And there's actually been studies in the field of bioharmonizing, is how the voice can influence water. And how if you talk evil about the water, right, then the water will turn dark. And if you say nice things to it, it creates these kind of like crystals. And these crystals are built of love. And so now I'm overviewing it because I'm not going through it right now. But that's pretty cool as well. And so, you know, so basically, the neuroscience research shows, and I'm going to tell you what they did, is they stuck a whole bunch of monks, like these Buddhist monks, into a room, stuck a whole bunch of electrodes on their head, and you can actually go and like fact check this. And what they did is they gave them mantras, okay, which are affirmations. right? I'm good, I'm beautiful, life is great, life is an adventure, whatever it is, right? And every single one did this one thing. Their brains lit up. And the regions of the brain that lit up involved identity and storytelling. Two of the most powerful areas of your brain that are always on anyways, right? So your prefrontal cortex, which is always managing your identity, right? It's saying, do I believe this? Do I not believe this? What he said sounds good, but do I really accept it? Did me stealing that candy bar, is that right or wrong? Right? That's always working on your behalf, okay? Even as you're listening to this. And so the prefrontal cortex came on, right? And what that means is, when you try to understand this, is that the same areas of your brain that kicked on for these monks was the storytelling brain. What that means is, when they were saying, I'm rich, I'm wealthy, I am excited, I am whatever it is, okay? That means your brain cannot and could not, for them, tell the difference between whether what they were saying and accepting is true or whether they were actually physically experiencing it in that moment. Now, you may have heard of stuff like this, but it's super powerful, right? Because what that means is your brain's always telling a story, which means it's always autobiographical. And it's never telling somebody else's story. It's always telling your own, okay? And so what that means is things that you talk to about, like within your mind, Neville called those inner conversations, right? Those are always kicking on dopamine and serotonin and oxytocin and all this kind of stuff. And the more you repeat them, the more you get dopamine for them. So yes, you can tell some pretty shitty stories about yourself and get rewarded for it, right? That's why it's hard to change sometimes. You know what I mean? And so, I have heard of David Jones. I don't know much, but feel free to share what you know about David Jones. That's might be interesting. And let me see, what does Grow say? You suffer because you're attached to your desires. Be the witness of your desires, and desires are all still there, but no power over you. Yeah, so that's very interesting. So I had a very, very good, Davy Jones Locker, but no power over you. So this is, again, a misinterpretation of Buddhism, right? So I have friends who are in Buddhism, and so I've had conversations about this thing. So everybody thinks that desire is suffering. It's the unfulfilled desire that is suffering, right? Meaning you haven't given it to yourself. So then that is one thing that's misunderstood in the work of Buddha, right? Is when he says this, he's not saying that you can't desire or that you shouldn't desire. He's saying the same exact thing that Neville is saying, that the Egyptians believed and that they wrote down in the Book of the Dead, that the Sumerians believed. Yes, by the way, I've been tracing this back for the last year-ish, right? How far back the law goes. It goes back to ancient Sumeria, one of the earliest civilizations that have ever lived. They believed in this, right? So it's not just the emerald tablets. It's not just the green tablets. It's not just Thoth, right? It goes way back, okay? So the ancients knew this, okay? So again, what do we do with affirmations? So science is saying robotic affirmations work. Okay, that's what I wanted to share with you about. Now, most people are going to be like, yeah, but Neville said he was against it. No, he didn't. He actually never said once he was against it. He was saying vain repetition. Okay, now what does that mean? You have to understand everything's a context. The problem is people quote him out of context, right? And it's like they like Christians will quote the Bible out of context, or Islamic people will, Muslims will quote the Quran out of context, and Buddhists will quote will quote their books out of context, and Hindus the Gita, and all of this kind of stuff, right? And so we have to understand that there's a context, and so even within this context where he seems like he's slamming affirmations, which he refers to as vain repetitions, he's quoting a verse from the Bible. He's even talking about it when he's actually exploring it with us. And he says, listen, vain repetitions, and this is very, very interesting, by the way, and this is a better answer for us, I think. And so he's talking about a section of Scripture, okay? And in that section of Scripture, Jesus, who is not a man and who has never lived, right, but is a metaphor for your highest state, your highest mental state that you can achieve, right? But he's having a conversation with the Pharisees, which is basically a psychological metaphor for you having a conversation with yourself and warring with yourself, right? Paul actually uses the word battle, right? And in the mystical, and there's a great book I have that actually breaks all of these esoteric symbols down. And Neville used that same book that I bought. And so what it is, battle is actually energy. So when you hear the word battle or war in scripture, it's talking about energy, right? And emotional energy. So the good emotion, bad emotion, it's the internal war, right? So when Jesus is talking to the Pharisees, okay, he's kind of attacking them, and he's saying, hey, don't do anything about like vain repetition, or like how the heathens do, or where people are going out and looking for social, like virtue signaling, like make themselves look good and blah, 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 right? And so there's a part of you that's going to want to do that, okay? And so, right? And so, oh, that's good. Actually, I'm going to come to that, Kevin, as well. And, by the way, if you're commenting, I'm going to come to your comments for sure. Thank you for commenting, by the way. And if you haven't, make sure you press like on this thing because it helps the algorithm. And so when he's talking about this, and he says, "Do nothing in vain repetition," right? But in prayer and petition, give up your concerns to God. Okay, prayer is assumption. Prayer means assumption. It means I'm assuming I'm rich. I'm assuming I'm wealthy. I'm assuming I'm healthy. I'm assuming I'm loved. I'm assuming whatever it is, right? I'm the best drug dealer in LA. It doesn't matter, right? I'm kidding, but it really doesn't matter because some people are using the law for their selfish whatever. But basically, when he says do nothing with a vain repetition, notice what he's doing. He actually is juxtaposing, or he's separating, and he's comparing two separate things. Okay, so he's saying, don't do this like those people that are doing it for the outside. So now the outside is your outer self. You with the name, the memories, the childhood, the trauma, the love, the hate, the differences, the envy, the jealousy. That's you. That's the outside. Okay? Now, he basically is saying don't be a blowhard. And I'm going to make sense of that. Don't be like those people who talk a good game. That's really what he's saying. This is not about the outer game at all. It's about the inner game, the emotional game, the mental game, the psychological game. That's really what he's saying. It's like, listen, so when Neville says don't do affirmations in vain repetition, and because that's what he's inferring, because he never actually says like affirmations, right? But that is what he's inferring. What he's saying is, if you are doing things to make yourself look good, that's a form of affirmation, right? But if you're just doing it to make yourself look good, and you're playing the social game, right? And I'm good at the social game, and I know loads of people, right, that are good at the social game, and that's all you do. It's like you're a blowhard. Like you're just like, look at me, I'm great. And so he's saying, don't be like the Pharisees who are more concerned about the outer self, the outer appearance. So if you're using affirmations and saying, look at me, I'm affirming, and I've been able to do this, and blah blah blah, then it's wasted on you, right? And so yeah, exactly. They've received their reward, right? Meaning nothing inside of them has changed, but outside, right? And by the way, it's kind of sad because people are doing it for social play, and all of us do it. I'm not saying there's anything like. Well, actually, no, I am saying there's stuff wrong with it because most of it comes out of a lack anyways. Like, oh, I need your praise. Oh, I need this and I need that, right? You were talking about, Kevin, earlier about, actors. Some actors do this for the accolades, right? And so if you're not giving the accolades within, you're going to go outward. And so when he's talking about this, okay, thank you for the likes, then he's really critiquing this idea of affirming for the outside self. Right? So, and by the way, let's be clear. Affirmations do not have to go like, I have a great house, or I have a very rich business. Like affirmations are just any claim that you make about life, love, hatred, good, bad, weather, health, whatever it is. It doesn't matter. Or even other people. It's just a claim. It's an assumption. That's an affirmation. Right? That is what affirmations are. That's the heartbeat of them. So there's another verse that Neville actually gets where his critique is coming from. And that is that God looks to the heart, not to the outside of man, right? Which is just everybody. It's not a gender centric thing, okay? And so that's what he's saying. The inner self is only playing the inner game. Doesn't really give a crap what you say about yourself on the outside. Doesn't even act, according to that verse, really isn't paying attention. Like, it's kind of like somebody who is like, looking at somebody who's always kind of stuck up, or like thinks that they're the best thing since sliced pudding. Actually, there's no such thing as sliced pudding, but if there was, actually no, it just wouldn't be amazing. But I mean, like, they just think that they're the best thing. They're getting their reward, right? And so God doesn't care about that. God doesn't waste. God, as in the inner self or the mental self, doesn't give a crap and isn't wasting time on it. It's God's going deeper. That's really what it is. Like how you talk about yourself when no one's around, how you feel when no one's around, how you believe that you are as a person, or how people are to you. All of that matters from the inside out only. That's it, right? So, and by the way, I'm going to come back to these comments. So, when you're affirming, never affirm from a past experience. But I'm going to explain that. Remember, never affirm from a past experience. So if I forget, remind me, because I'm going to come back to these. So let me see. It's the feeling of that desire which keeps you from that desire. You need to transform the feeling into available energy to open the doors. Yeah, so I mean, I think that's a good way to say it. But also, it's the feeling of the wish fulfilled. And I don't like using phrases like this. Like, I mean, Neville had these amazing phrases. Problem is, people have taken his work and they've run with it to the point of cliche. And he said this. He does not like cliche. In fact, he was very Jewish in that regard. No, he wasn't Jewish. What I'm saying is the ancient biblical world hated stereotypes, hated cliches, hated axioms, right? It's like, well, the sun always shines after the rains. Fuck off. That's like, honestly, that's the ancient world's response to stuff like that. Because it like life can't be encapsulated by these little one statements. Right? Like, and they were angry about it. They're like, stop doing that, right? And it's not just in the Bible that it actually, it's in the Quran, it's in the Gita. Like, whoever these ancients were, dude, like the secret club of people, right? They just were frustrated by people using cliches, okay? And hang on, let me come back to these comments. So how do you explain the Tao, which cannot be spoken, is not the eternal Tao? So again, this is really good. So that has to do with labels, right? Labeling anything is a limitation. So the Tao, the way, right? The way, so Jesus says he is the way, which is the imagination. The Tao, so the more you label it, it's not it. So there's a great philosopher I follow, and she's still around, named Julia Kristeva. And she's a linguistic philosopher. And she says this is one of my favorite quotes ever. But it'll explain your question, Kevin, which I think is great. But it says, language exiles us from the object of our understanding. Language exiles us from the object of our understanding. Are you with me? So every single time you call this a book, you've full on taken any possibility of it being anything else other than this object. So any idea is a form of limitation. So even if it's a good one, you're still limiting God, right? Because God is your awareness. God is your imagination. And so every time you go into the imagination, you're still limiting, right? However, that's why Neville says you have to start out going to the I am without labels. Who is the way, right? And the way is as in the way to your fulfilled desire, right? And so that is what is really being said about the Tao, right? Is you have to understand that the eternal Tao, the eternal way, is that which has no label, right? That energy source called God, love, whatever, the inner self. I like the inner self, right? It's more narcissistic. I'm kidding, but I mean, like, it's this thing where you have to learn to understand and accept that you're going to label things, but to choose those labels daily. And this is what Neville says to do, morning, noon, and night, right? And he's being literal. So let's see. It's about making your energy in your chakras flow freely. When the energy settles in your heart, we can manifest. Yeah, well, and I know what you're saying, by the way, and I actually agree. Now, I would say, though, that we are manifesting all the time. We're never not manifesting, right? And so, but I know what you mean, as in, and there is something to be said about that. Now, I don't always agree with the science of the chakras. However, here's a cool technique. One of the things is, if you look up the psychology of your chakras, that's even more interesting. So, especially like if you've ever had trauma bodily trauma, physical trauma, emotional trauma, all this kind of stuff, right? So if you look up like the psychology of fear chakra, it'll full on break down possible things that have caused fear in your life, and it may trigger a memory for you that actually might bring up something that you need to revise or change. So although I may not believe all the woo-woo side of chakras, I do believe in the psychology of chakras. And so again, not knocking it. I'm not like, oh, that's wrong, whatever. I mean, I have clients who believe in chakras and we get along really well. And again, if you're looking for coaching, get in touch. I have coaching packages. I have monthly payment plans, all this kind of good stuff. Everything's science-backed. But let's get back to the show. So let's go back to affirmations. How do you create an affirmation? Because remember, you're always affirming something. I'm affirming something to you right now. I'm affirming this conversation. I'm affirming that I love what I do. I'm affirming that hopefully this is helpful. I'm affirming that our conversations, whether they're back and forth, are helpful to you and to me, right? I'm assuming a lot. Those are all affirmations. Assumptions are affirmations, okay? Beliefs are affirmations. So, how do you create them though? Ones that work. So Neville says live in the end. Again, this is a phrase. All that means, and I love how he brings in the movies. He said if you walked into a theater and you saw the end of the movie, then you would know, and in one sense you almost wouldn't even care. You would still might want to know the story, but you wouldn't care as much because you already know the ending, right? And so he goes, basically that's what a wish fulfilled is, right? When you're living in the end, you're living in the end of the movie, which is whatever you want. So what would you be like? What would you do? Where would you go? What stores would you go to? What kind of people would you be hanging out with? What kind of car would you drive? Where would you be living? Why would you be living there? Right? Always ask why as well, because that's where the emotions come in. What's driving? And so yes, you can say things like, I have a rich house. I have loads of friends. Those aren't bad. One, always do it in the present or in the past, right? Because the past is telling your subconscious, oh shit, like that person already sees themselves as this, right? Never in the future, right? Because that means there's still a lack. And so you can actually still keep measuring things as a lack and they won't come, right? And so you always want to either do it in the present and the past. So you can also use affirmations in writing, right? So you can write these down on a regular basis. And in fact, I encourage most of my clients to do this and to write about 30 to 50, yes, and I try to do that every day, right? And these can be anything from small, like, hey, I received a compliment. I received a cup of coffee. I received a new t-shirt. It doesn't matter. This is just for you to get those rolling and also encourage yourself. But then you can say, I have a lavish income, which is one that Neville picked up on, right? And encourage us to use. I am smart. I am whatever, right? Like, and by the way, this is not about just getting stuff in this world. You can actually go deeper. Like this is where you kind of get the Matrix and Neo stuff, where it's like, I learned guitar fast. I'm a confident person. People are magnetically like connected to me without effort, right? Or whatever it is. So you can use it for like personality changes, for skills, right? All of that kind of stuff. So don't just think about that. And also when you revise, and again, I'm not gonna talk about revision a lot today. When that means changing and actually going in and changing a scene from the first person, right? Don't just revise for bad stuff. That's important, but just also revise for good stuff. Like if something went really well, make it 100 times, like 100 times better. Revise for good on top of good, right? But again, affirmations always have to be from the end. It can't be, I will have a nice house. No, I've loved my house, or I've been loving my house for the last few months, right? And if you want to use affirmations in scripting, do that, right? Scripting actually works as well. Writing is very powerful for the brain. So, and the subconscious. So again, write everything. And this kind of writing technique, the journaling technique that I'm saying, is very powerful. Like, I mean, I've been able to manifest stuff within like minutes. Just be like, okay, I received a compliment. And then somebody called me like, da-da-da-da-da. Oh my gosh, I'm so da-da-da. Right? So it's one of those things where you just keep doing that. So affirmations, for them to work, have to be believed in, right? And so that means when you're putting it down, believe that you're it. You are it now, right? Now, they don't always have to be believed in. Let me be straight about that, okay? Because a lot of people say, no, when I say that you have to believe in them, no, you don't. You don't always have to believe in them. Because think about this. You don't have to believe in manifestation for you to manifest. You're manifesting. So you don't have to believe in it in that sense. You have to muster up like, oh, I gotta drop a log just to get faith. No, it's not about that. It is about being and being convinced, and it's about that element of, realizing that what you say, you're actually creating. So some people say, well, like for example, Neville said that essentially words don't manifest. Emotions actually don't manifest. What manifests is belief. Here's the thing though. Words come from your beliefs. Emotions come from your beliefs. Do you get it? It's actually backwards the way that we've been taught. So you're manifesting from beliefs or assumptions, which is the same thing, right? But they're fueled by emotions. They're fueled by identity. And I'll go over the state again, and I teach and I go deeper in my coaching program on what a state is. But a state is three things. It is your emotions, it's your beliefs, and your memories. Right? All three of those are always working together. Always. It's a mental ecosystem. And remember that there's beliefs, not one belief. And so if you're changing a belief and something still manifests that you didn't want to manifest, guess what? You probably didn't change either the memory or the words around it, right? You're still buying into it, okay? And so when you're coming to affirmations, yes, affirmations can and do and will continue to manifest, whether they're robotic or not, okay? But the way that you create them matter. So always do them from the end. This is always meaning you always want what you want, and then what would you have, what would you be, who would you be, right? So if you're like, hey, I want to be a speaker. Okay, well then one affirmation could be, yeah, you could do the boring ones, right? Like I'm always confident. Confidence comes easy to me, right? All of this kind of stuff, right? And so, but then you can imagine from the first person you walk on a stage and a stadium is filled with people. That's the end, right? The end goal is you have a level of fame that you want, right? Because why would you want to speak to one person? You already do that anyways. It's called yourself. So, right? So you'd have this, but then maybe you even say as an affirmation, wow, these 10,000 people love my speech. That's an affirmation. Like anything you put down as a belief, whether it be in the past tense or the present, is what you're going to experience, right? Let me see. Sam Harris does not believe in free will. I understand you do. What drives you to believe in free will? Well, that's a very scientific perspective, and I've followed Sam Harris off and on, especially when I was into philosophy a lot. You know what I mean? So, like when it comes to free will, Neville says, actually, if you argue from Neville's perspective, right, is he actually believes that we have a how would you say this? A limited amount of free will, right? Neuroscience says we have no free will. That's where Sam Harris is coming from. I don't believe that. Even though I can explain to you what's coming from, and even in the work of Robert Sapolsky, who's one of my favorite biologists from Stanford, is absolutely next level, I still don't agree with him. Because and this is where Neville says we do have free will, which is, he says we have the free will to choose our states. What's a state? A body of beliefs with a perception filter, which is another way of saying the way we see the world, right? And so the way we see the world is always fueled by our beliefs. So that's where, for Neville, we have a limited amount of free will, right? And if you think about it, that just makes sense. Like, I mean, think about this. Unless you were the only person who lived on this earth, we're always going to experience free will in limited capacity, because we're social beings, right? So even though we're divine, we're experiencing our divinity in not just our own vacuum, we're experiencing it in a social vacuum, right? And so we're always interacting with other people with different ideas and being called out about different ideas or whatever it is. And so in that sense, yes, I believe that free will exists. I do believe it's limited, but I don't believe that we don't have free will, like outright, right? So the emotional body, right? And by the way, that's actually not very far from what Neville talks about, right? He talks about how the body is an emotional filter. And that's Freudian, by the way. So if you go through and you pick apart Neville's work, he's influenced by two psychologists, three. William James, Freud, but predominantly Jung. So Carl Jung, Jung, if you've never heard of him, talks about the shadow. Now that's where I don't agree with Neville, because I don't agree with the shadow, right? I know what he's saying, I know where he's getting it from, and I know where Jung got it from. I just don't believe it, right? And Neville kind of kicks himself, right, in his own feet by saying, you know, oh, we have a shadow, and yet we're limited by our beliefs. Because what he's saying is that really, and he didn't mean to contradict himself, I don't think, is that basically your so-called shadow is just a limited body of beliefs, which that's what he says, right? But it's actually a contradiction when you think about the word of Jung, like the work of Jung, right? And so, yeah, so again, and by the way, so I'm a psychologist by trade, so this is what I've studied. And so when I read his work, I'm thinking psychologically. And he even argues the whole Bible, everything, mysticism, the law, it's all psychological, right? 100%, right? Let's see, I struggle brutally with affirmations. I often find myself doubting as I repeat them, or it seems the universe itself is telling me not to affirm for an SP. But I also feel like it led me to them. Okay, so that's an interesting thing, okay? Because the universe is always for you, always. There's no demon out there. There's no devil. You are always your own devil, which means you're limiting beliefs, right? And so if there's a belief in that there is a divine being or the universe or God or love that's trying to limit you, that's your own beliefs, right? And so that's the first port of call is, why am I trying to limit myself? Maybe somebody's taught you to do that. Maybe society has taught you to do that. Maybe your church groups taught you to do that. Maybe a past relationship, a childhood memory, whatever that is, right? And so, yeah, so basically what you want to do with that, though, is, you know, when you struggle, there's a reason why you struggle. I always be a why person. Like, why am I struggling? And the coolest thing, and here's a little tip. I always ask the inner self if there's like a memory, because I would challenge you to revise one memory every day. I don't care where it is. You could be 7, 12, 13, last week, yesterday, 10 minutes ago. Always, once a day, revise a memory, right? For the rest of your life, every day, right? Because you're unlearning that pattern then. And so, you know, when you doubt, though, what you're saying is, I'm not powerful enough, or this affirmation isn't powerful enough. So that means someone taught you to give your power away. Someone normalized that for you, right? And by the way, most of the time it's from your childhood. It doesn't have to be, but most of the time it is, right? And so, you know, Jean Piaget, he's a developmental psychologist, dead, but and he says that everybody will have their map of the world, right? By the ages of 5 to 8. Are you with me? And so that means every belief, how you're going to play yourself in the world, what other people, how other people should see you, what jobs you're going to want, all this kind of stuff is all mapped out by the ages of 8, right? It doesn't mean that you can't change it, but it just means that most of us are operating off of that without even being aware of it, okay? So yeah, so when you struggle, ask why, okay? And then also make things exciting. That's why I'm like, don't just do like, I have a great house. That sounds boring as hell. What is it? I have a 7-room house. I have a 4-bedroom house with a large sink. Whatever it is, just keep saying, I have a 4-bedroom house with a large sink. You can affirm that, right? So let's see. What do you think about the Lord Ganesh? So I think, like any other book, everything is a metaphor, right? So whether it be the Gita, whether it be, like I've even started reading through the Quran, and I'm not Muslim, but only as a psychological metaphor. So when you start reading and realizing that actually Neville was correct, and that the Bible was written not because these people existed or these events happened, and yes, some of them may have happened, but it doesn't matter, that they were written as metaphors, psychological metaphors, then you take that with you everywhere you go. Watch movies, and now I even watch movies and I'm like, oh yeah, that actually proves Neville's point, right? All this kind of stuff. Now Neville's not my God, he's not my Lord, he's not my Savior, and he says don't do that. Do not heroize him. He was just a man. But he was also somebody who was awakened, and that's what he wanted for everybody else, right? And so so when I'm looking at these characters, right, Vishnu, all these other characters, they're just telling a story about the human mind, right? And so, you know, it depends on what version of Ganesh that you accept, right? Because if you notice that the Hindus are very pluralistic, even in their stories of these gods, there's always, sometimes these stories are contradictory, right? And so yeah, so for me, Ganesh is just a symbol. Um, so is revising a situation only once enough to rewire the memory? Only you can answer that, right? And I know that's not very helpful, but if you feel like I'm still doing the same pattern, right? So for example, really simple, dumb example. Let's say today you overate, right? And you're trying to actually lose weight, or you're trying to do something, whatever it is, right? And you felt like you failed. One, that means you believe in loss. If you believe in failure, you believe in loss, right? Yeah.
Sorry, Mom wants you to take messages.
Oh, okay. All right. Can you tell her what's happening?
Yeah.
Okay. So, all right. So, if you believe in loss, okay, then you believe in failure. So then what can you believe in? Everything is an opportunity for learning. That's a better way to say it, right? But then can't you revise a situation, okay, only once? Yes, you can. I believe you can. But let's say again, let's say you ate like 10 cookies today. Okay. If you go in and you revise it, and tomorrow you eat 10 more cookies, you haven't revised your memory, right? You'll know that you revised it when you change, right? And yes, you can revise things within seconds. It's just like any other manifestation, right? But I want to talk about that in much more in depth, because I want to talk about more new research about neuroplasticity in the brain and the mind, right? But you know, a really, really quick thing before I go is, you know, when you're doing these affirmations, you know, don't like doubt. You're gonna get doubt. So, and Raheem, you and I have talked about this before. Doubt is what you get as part of life. Okay, so that's what Neville says as well, right? You have Satan and God, which is basically belief, and you have doubt. You're always gonna have them. Do not vilify doubt, because remember, then that's agreeing to loss. Doubt is a teacher. Doubt is showing you where your memories are. Doubt is showing you where your doubts are. Doubt is showing you your path as it stands right now. Doubts may also show you what has happened in your past, but you don't have to accept as true. And so you persist in the new self, right? So, you know, one, thank you for being on. You all are amazing. If you're looking for coaching, science-backed, get in touch. There is a link to a free Discord. If you can't access that, let me know. Email me at that the bio email, and I'll you know, get back to you. I'm hoping I'm gonna do these earlier, by the way. Just of some awesome stuff going on. So, and I'll share that probably soon. But I'm probably gonna be creating more content. Join the Discord. There's loads of free stuff in there, ebooks, all this kind of stuff. So, much love to you all. Be safe in the world. Manifest amazing things. Keep the questions going. Keep this conversation going. If I missed something, write another question in you know, one of my other videos, and I'll make sure I get back to you ASAP. So, much love to you all, and have a great night. Thank you all. Thank you, Raheem. You're awesome.